Okay, our next example is we want to compute a Banzaf power distribution for a voting system. And here's our situation. The disciplinary committee at George Washington High School has 5 members, the principal, vice principal, 3 teachers. When voting on A, that should be an A, specific disciplinary action, the principal has 3 votes, the vice principal has 2, and the teachers have 1 each. A total of 5 votes is necessary. Okay, so 5 votes is necessary for any disciplinary action. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up a weighted voting system. I know the quota is 5 because there are 5 votes necessary for any disciplinary action. And then we have a total of 5 players. We have the principal, who is player 1, with 3 votes. We have the vice principal, is player 2, with 2 votes. And then we have 3 teachers with 1 vote each. Okay, so there's our quota and our 5 players. What we want to do is compute the power distribution for this system. So remember, the very first thing we have to do is we have to find all of the winning coalitions for this voting system. So there's our voting system. Let's start listing our winning coalitions. So what I like to do is I like to start with the coalition that has the least amount of players. And in this example, player 1 and player 2 voting yes gives me a 3 plus 2. That is a total of 5 votes. Okay, and that is the only way that I can get 2 players to vote yes and this motion to pass. So that's the only way that any combination of these numbers at the top, any combination of these, combination of 2 that will add to 5 or greater. The next one is let's look at all of the coalitions that could pass this motion with with 3 players voting. So I know that if I have player 1, player 2, and player 3 vote, that would be a total of 6 votes that would pass. In addition, player 1, player 2, that's first one is a 1, player 2, and player 4 will give me a passing vote of 6. And player 1, player 2, player 5 will give me passing a motion with 6. In addition, what I could do is I could do player 1, not player 2, but player 3 and player 4. So player 1 has 3 votes. 3 and 4 each have 2, so that gives me a total of 5 votes. I could also do player 1, player 3, player 5 for a total of 5 votes. I could also do player 1, player 4, and player 5 for a total of 5 votes. So those are all the 3-member coalitions that would pass. Every coalition that has 4 players would pass. So I need to list all of the ways that I can get 4 players together. So the first one is player 1, player 2, player 3, player 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4 has a total of 1, 2, 3, and 4 has a total of 7 votes. Player 1, player 2, player 3, and player 5 gives me a total of 7 votes. Again, I'm listing all of the possible 4-player coalitions here. Player 1, player 2, player 4, player 5 gives me 7 votes. Player 1, player 3, player 4, player 5 gives me 6 total votes. And then last, player 2, player 3, player 4, player 5 passes with 5 total votes. And let's not forget, we also have the Grand Coalition. Remember, the Grand Coalition is the coalition of all players. So player 1, player 2, player 3, player 4. Player 5 will give me a total of 8 votes. Okay, so I listed all of the winning coalitions. Now what I need to do is I need to find how many ways or how many times each player is critical. So we're looking for the Banzaf number of each player. Banzaf 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we now need to find these Banzaf numbers. So how many ways is player 1 critical? Remember, critical means if we take player 1's vote away, that will no longer pass. So we have to remember that player 1 has a total of 3 votes. So I find all of the coalitions that have player 1 in it. Here's the first one. If I take 5 and subtract 3, that gives me a 2. That's no longer going to pass. So player 1 is definitely critical in that example. Now I look over here. 6 minus 3 will not pass. Player 1's critical again. Here's another player 1. Critical again. Here's another player 1. Critical again. Another, and another in the 4-player coalitions. Now we come over to, in our 3-player coalitions rather, now we come over to our 4-player coalitions. Player 1, remember, has 3 votes. 7 minus 3 is 4. Critical. 7 minus 3 again is 4. Critical. 7 minus 3 is 4. Again, critical. 6 minus 3 is 3. Critical. And 8 minus 3 is 5. Not critical. So this is the only coalition in which player 1, if he's involved in that coalition, is not critical. So now we count up these marks, and we see that player 1 has a Banzaf number of 11. Now we go through with player 2. Critical here. Player 2, remember, has 2 total votes. 5 minus 2 is 3. That's less than 5. Player 2 is critical. Here, 6 minus 2 is 4. That's less than. Critical. 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 Player 2, 7 minus 2, that's 5. Not critical here. Not critical here. Not critical here. 5 minus 2, critical here. So that's a total of 5. And then 8 minus 2, not critical. So I see that player 2's Banzaf number is 5. Now I go on to player 3, who has a Banzaf number, has 1, not a Banzaf number, has a total weight of 1. Now I go through all of my coalitions that have player 3. 6 minus 1, not critical, because 6 minus 1 is 5, and 5 will pass. 5 minus 1, critical. 5 minus 1, critical. 7 minus 1, not critical. 7 minus 1, not critical. 6 minus 1, not critical. Here, 5 minus 1 is 4. That's less than 5. Critical here. And finally, not critical here. So player 3 has a Banzaf number of 3. Now I look at player number 4. Player 4 has a weight of 1. So I go through and I find all the coalitions with 4, with player 4 in it. I subtract that 1 vote and see if player 4 is critical. 6 minus 1, not critical. 5 minus 1, player 4 is critical there. 5 minus 1 here, critical there. 7 minus 1, not critical. 7 minus 1, not critical. 6 minus 1, not critical. However, 5 minus the 1, critical. And finally, 8 minus 1, not critical. So I see that player 4 is critical a total of 3 times. Now I move on to player 5. I'm going to need a new pen color. Let's do light blue for player 5. Player 5 has a weight of 1. And you can probably guess that it's also going to be 3, but let's just check and make sure. 6 minus 1, not critical. 5 minus 1, critical. 5 minus 1, critical. 7 minus 1, not critical. 7 minus 1, not critical. 6 minus 1, not critical. 5 minus 1, critical. And 8 minus 1, not critical. So I see that player 5 is critical a total of 3 times. Now, so far we have all of the Banzaf power, the Banzaf numbers. Now we need to find out what is the Banzaf index of each. Remember, to find the Banzaf index, what we do is we add up the total number of times any player is critical. So 11 plus 5 is 16, plus 3 is 19, plus 3 is 22, plus 3 more is 25. So we have 25 instances in which players are critical. Now, to find the Banzaf index for each player, beta 1, beta 2, beta 3, beta 4, and beta 5, what we need to do is take how many times is that player critical for player 1 divided by the total number of criticals. 11 divided by 25 is 44%. Player 2 is 5 divided by 25, and that is 20%. Player 3 is 3 divided by 25, and that is 12%. And I know player 4 and player 5 are each also 12%. So each one of these numbers individually is a Banzaf index, but collectively, here is the Banzaf power distribution for this weighted voting system. Okay, so that's really, it's not a difficult mathematical concept. We can see that player 1, what this 44% means is that player 1, 44% of the times that player 1 is involved in a critical situation, in a critical coalition, 44% of the times his vote counts. Player 2's vote counts 20% of the time. Players 3, 4, and 5 each, their votes count 12% of the time. So that's what the Banzaf power distribution does for us.